Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Widow of Sarajevo. In the sweltering summer heat of Sarajevo, 1914, the streets buzzed with the promise of change and the shadow of growing unrest. The city, caught at the crossroads of empires and burgeoning nationalism, hummed with whispers of rebellion, hope, and trepidation. Amid this tapestry of tension and ambition lived Aliska Milosevic, a seamstress whose skill with needle and thread wove not just fabric, but the fragile connection between the lives entwined by fate and history. It was an ordinary day suffused with the scent of lilacs and fresh rain when Aliska's world unknowingly brushed against the catastrophic event that would soon ignite the flames of war. A day when a simple act of kindness and craftsmanship would inadvertently alter history. Aliska's modest shop sat tucked away on a narrow cobblestone street lined with linden trees, their leaves rustling softly in the late June breeze. The shop's windows were cluttered with bolts of cloth, linen from the surrounding villages, rich silk from Vienna, and muted wools dyed with the seasonal colors of the Danube. Aliska herself was 50 years old, with weathered hands that bore the engravings of decades of delicate stitching, and eyes the color of storm clouds, heavy with the weight of both hardship and resilience. From dawn until dusk, she sat at her battered wooden table, tailoring garments for the city's both modest inhabitants and wealthy patrons who sought her deft touch on their dresses and uniforms. It was on the morning of June 27 that a young man, barely more than a boy, stepped into her shop clutching a small bundle wrapped carefully in cloth. His name was Gavrilo Princip, though Aliska could not have known it then. His eyes darted nervously as he approached, and his voice trembled with urgency beneath the steady rhythm of the bustling city outside. He introduced himself as a courier for a cause many whispered about but few openly embraced, a cause that sought to unravel the oppressive reign of the Austro-Hungarian Empire over their Slavic brothers and sisters. "Ma'am," he began cautiously, "I have a package that I must have sewn into a lining. It must be hidden, secure, not to be noticed. Can you help me?" Aliska, accustomed to sewing patches and mending rips, frowned slightly. "Show me what you have," she said. The young man carefully unwound the bundle, revealing a small, iron pistol that gleamed cold and loaded, though Aliska would never come to understand the gravity of the weapon she was handling. "You want me to sew a gun's lining?" she asked incredulously. He nodded solemnly, explaining briefly that it was not just a weapon, but a symbol of resistance, a tool for freedom from a distant tyranny. His words sounded like something from a dream, or a dangerous tale better left to whispered confessionals rather than spoken aloud. Aliska hesitated, but her heart, stubborn and kind, compelled her to help. She took the pistol, counting her blessing for the opportunity to do a good deed for what she believed was the liberation of her people. Carefully, she stitched a hidden pocket into the lining of a leather jacket he carried with him, encasing the cold steel in invisibility beneath the soft material. The work took hours, the needle passed just so to avoid detection. And when she finished, Gavrilo clasped the jacket close to his chest, as if sealing a pact with destiny. They parted quietly, the seamstress content she had done no harm but aided a man supplicating to an unspecified cause. The boy clutching his concealed weapon, each step taking him closer to his deadly purpose. Aliska would never know that the pistol hidden in the jacket's lining was the very one used in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand the next day. A bullet that would echo through history and tear apart the fragile peace of Europe. The assassination, carried out on June 28 at the Latin Bridge of Sarajevo, sent shockwaves that rippled beyond the narrow Bosnian streets. The Archduke and his wife Sophie's deaths plunged the world into the Great War. But while history immortalized the shooters and political tensions, few paused to consider the hands that enabled such acts quietly. For Aliska, The news came creeping like a long shadow as reports trickled into her shop. Initially, there was disbelief and confusion. Had she, a humble seamstress, been tricked into aiding an assassin? Her heart beat heavily with anxiety. Could she have been complicit in this tragedy? She wrestled with guilt and fear, locking herself away and watching the skies darken over Sarajevo. The shop no longer felt like a sanctuary but a silent witness to upheaval. Yet in the days that followed, Aliska's resolve hardened. Though painfully aware of the consequences of her unknowing involvement, she refused to let despair consume her. Instead, she decided to honor the memory of those lost and her own conscience by becoming a protector of peace in her fractured city. The next months unfolded as the Great War descended. The empire shredded, boundaries redrawn like torn paper maps, and Sarajevo, once a city where cultures intermingled, became a crucible of loss and survival. Aliska used her shop not only to sew clothing but to sew threads of hope. Hidden beneath her shop was a small cellar where she, with the help of a few trusted friends, provided shelter to those displaced by skirmishes or targeted for their ethnicity. Refugees, soldiers, families broken by the brutal tide, found in her shop a flicker of kindness and warmth. She mended not only the fabric of their garments but pieced together fragile lives shattered by war. Her involvement did not go unnoticed. Austro-Hungarian officials grew suspicious of the serendipitous many visitors to her humble shop, yet no evidence ever found her guilt in the assassination itself. The truth remained buried as deeply as the gun in the jacket's lining. Yet in those war-torn years, Aliska's reputation as the Widow of Sarajevo emerged, not because she had lost her husband, but because she bore the solitary grief and endurance of a city marred by bloodshed. Her neighbors whispered stories of how, during the worst bombings and unrest, Aliska tended to the injured in her attic, her hands stained with soot and blood, sewing bandages and mending wounds with the same care she employed in stitching velvet gowns. She became a symbol of resilience, a quiet form of rebellion against the violence destroying her world. As the war ravaged on, so did Aliska's journey. Letters arrived from faraway lands, some from grateful souls whose lives she had touched, others from children given clothes to keep warm during harsh winters. Though her shop was often battered and her supply of materials scarce, she persisted, threading a line of hope through the darkness of devastation. One autumn evening, in 1918, as the war whispered toward its uncertain end, a familiar figure stepped into the dimly lit shop. It was an older man, worn by battle and time, whose trembling hands reached out to clasp Aliska's in thanks. He was a former soldier, once shielded by the garments she made, now standing as a witness to the survival her craft had nurtured. "You saved more than clothes," he said softly. "You saved us." For a fleeting moment, Aliska allowed herself a rare smile, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and solace. She knew the cost of the pistol concealed within that jacket, the lives stolen and wars begun. But she also knew the cost of compassion and courage. The Widow of Sarajevo did not erase history, nor undo the sorrow bred by its darkest days. But in her quiet ways, she wove a story of survival, remembrance, and the unyielding power of humanity sewn together by hands often unseen and hearts too quietly brave. Years later, when the ashes had cooled and new borders drawn, it was said that Aliska's shop remained, a testament not to the bullet, but to the needle, not to violence, but to nurture. And beneath the scarred city, a whispered secret lingered, that even amidst the turmoil that shaped empires, the gentlest hands sewed the strands of peace. For more stories, like and subscribe.